Feeling the need for change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your midwife, teacher, and host for this podcast. Together, you and I are going to navigate the interior life. And we're going to do that by unearthing our personal truths, our own insight, and our inner knowing. These are weekly teachings that are brought to you by hard-nosed scientific evidence, focused on spiritual direction with integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work. Welcome back to the Turning Inward podcast. I'm with Elizabeth Martin at mindingthegaps.life. She's blogging about minding the gaps and stepping into the unknown. And Elizabeth, I'm so excited that you and I are having this conversation. We found each other across the digital divide, and I just resonated with you, went to your blog, and just, oh my God, so much. But I want to start with you sharing with the listeners who you are and what minding the gaps means.
Okay. So about 1.5 years ago, I had the opportunity my job was ending due to a merger, and my house sold on a handshake to a friend. And I had the opportunity to take the gap year that I wanted to take when I graduated from college probably 40 years ago and didn't take at the time. And instead, I thought it was a good idea to get married and have children, which it was a good idea to have the children. But so as I prepared for this journey into the great unknown, I decided to document and process these changes in my life by creating this blog, Minding the Gaps. So Minding the Gaps to me is fully experiencing life, whether it's a 30-second noticing the bird that flew overhead or 30 days in Italy. All of those are experiences, and I rushed through my life the previous 35, 36, 7 years, and I didn't have time for those. And then it's a little bit of an illusion, or, it refers to Mind the Gap. If you've ever traveled in London and you've heard every time the doors open on the tube, it says mind the gap. And that's so you don't fall in that crevice. So, it's important to be mindful, and it's also important not to fall in the crevices of life.
Yeah. So, and stepping into the unknown feels like a falling, but what you're saying is you're just stepping across the gap.
Right. Well, you're just mindful of where you're putting your feet, and you may not know where it's all going. But if you're fully present, then it's an adventure and an experience. And when you're rushing through it at the end of the day, you can't remember. It's the difference between doing and being.
Well, and I also want to draw attention to what you said earlier, that it could be either what your experience was, which is 30 days in Italy, or 30 seconds in your life right now.
Right. And I think especially in all the roles we play in our life, but especially as mothers, and I have 5 children, and I have 5 grandchildren, and I have 5 siblings. So family and obligations to our roles as younger women and younger men, those can preclude taking time to be mindful. And actually, we feel our ego can be fed by how important we are and how busy we are. And, someone will ask you how you are when you're younger, and you'll say, I'm so busy. Like, that's a good answer. And, I remember once seeing an alternative doctor, and he said, "What do you do to be?" And I was like, be what? I don't do time to pee? That's a stupid question. And now I'm like, oh my God, maybe he could have saved me a lot earlier.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That's what I'm seeing in the culture and in the folks that I talk to is that it's not related. You know, for me, a lot like you, it was related to the dissolution, the dissolving of my role as mother that sort of made me melt into a recognition of who am I being versus what am I doing. But I think that I know it's not tied to an age is what I want to say. I think that culture is starting to somehow sort of mix. There's something happening that has people sort of looking at, is this who I want to be, not just what I want to do? And they're few and far between, but they're happening more and more. So for the most part, I agree that it happens at our age, right? It happens when we transition out of a role, and that transitioning of the role is tough. So can you talk about your experience around emptiness? For me was a dissolution. It was moving from a caterpillar to a butterfly. Now I know that I'm always a mother. I'm just the mother of grown men, and that's a different type of relationship than raising my children. But it took me a couple of years to come to that recognition. So what was your experience as you moved out of that role, or what happened for you?
Luckily, I've had, throughout most of the last decade, had multiple life coaches and business coaches and people that could stop my churning mind and help me focus. And I had one that called me when I was maybe 3 weeks into Italy or 2 weeks. And I said, okay, this is really great, but now we need to start talking about assignments because I'm going to go back home and I need to know what I'm doing and I need to know where I'm living in September, because I knew where I was going to live June through September was with my daughter and her family. But I didn't have a plan past that. And I, as a lifelong income earner, didn't have a plan for earning income either. And I was panicked, and she said, oh, no, you don't. Now you're going to learn to sit in it. And I was like, oh, no, you don't. And then one of the questions she asked me was, who were you before the world told you who to be? And I wrote a post on that, or as I like to call them sometimes, essays rather than blogs. That kind of helped me. And so I would like to say that then I got to my daughters in June, and we were busy through the end of June, and then it started again. Where am I going to be in September? What am I going to do? What's my contribution to the world? How do I earn it? You know, because I still had 2 sons in college. And then all these strange things came together, and I ended up moving to Colorado in September with a stranger living in her house. And 2 of my sons lived here. And again, it was a coach that kind of helped me jump into the gap and fall through it and see what happened. And I thought, well, I'll just come out here temporarily. And now I've been here 9 months, and I'm starting to build work and community. And this is not what I expected to happen at all. But by being very open and being guided at the same time, I have had an amazing year and a half.
I love that imagery, just the openness to possibility and potential, and also the gentle guidance, like someone walking with you as you journey.
Yes, that does help. And as a coach, you know that. Yes, you do. And I worship coaches because they make the difference. And I think everybody needs one more than they need a therapist. Some people need a therapist, but the coaches just help you redirect and see things and try things. And my life has been shaped by, I am grateful to all of mine.
Oh. Well, and I want to say, and I didn't open this, but you and I have never had a conversation before. I literally resonated with your story. So you and I are kind of meeting for the first time. And I don't know why I want to say that, but I do, and I did, and that's that. I found this line in one of your blogs because I couldn't sleep last night reading through most of them. And I just want to reflect it back to you and have you share your experience with us. It says, I have come to life and I'm training myself to live in the present moment, to say yes to experiences and no to gathering things. I've let go and found abundance surrounds me. Say more about that. You said you wrote that. I know, right?
Wow, I just got goosebumps from my own writing. So, when my granddaughter, the first pivotal moment in my 50s was not becoming a grandmother, but the grandmother of a child with cystic fibrosis who almost didn't live. And it was really touch and go. And I really started to realize not only my own impermanence and death, but that death and impermanence was possible for those I cherished the most, and that I was running out of time to live an authentic life. And experiences would now matter more to me and be the gifts that I gave my family rather than things. And we did. We started that right away. And then as this process grew, and so this was a 7-year process, and I think there were 7 pivotal moments that shaped it. The one being selling my house on a handshake on a dog walk. And when I had this opportunity, I only had 6 weeks to pack up my house and put everything in storage and do some traveling and then come back and stay with family. And everything is still in storage. So all I could fit in the car were some clothes and my dog and nothing else. As I stayed here longer and it turned to winter, everything was in storage. So I had to think about, okay, well, what clothes do I want to buy? And I'm going to buy them all secondhand because I have coats in storage and boots in storage. And so I started to only replace what I really needed. And I didn't. And then after a year and living in a fully furnished home, I said to my daughter, you keep my furniture. I don't need it anymore. And maybe I'll need furniture again someday, but I don't need that furniture. And she was building a second home. So it was a way to furnish that and a place where our family will gather anyway. But sometimes I think about that storage unit and I just kind of hyperventilate, like, oh no, what's in there? Because I haven't needed it in a year and a half. So obviously not that important.
Yeah. Well, I really picked up on what you said about 7 years, because what I hear from folks, and also with my own personal experiences, when I'm moving through a transition, I want it to happen fast. I'm like, snap my fingers, let's get this done. And you said 7 years.
It was 7 years from awareness and consciousness and awakening to action and doing, planning and mastery. Sometimes I use the model, this is the work I do anyway. Now, consulting is assess, plan, master. And I like to say that I did 7 years of assessments of what did I need, who was I, where was I going, what did I want, how could I pay for it? So there is an assessment period, and that's the awakening, the awareness, the assessment. That's kind of the AAA is what I should call it. Then you plan, but my planning was only 6 weeks to plan and 3 months at a time. I only knew what I was doing for 3 months at a time. And as a mother who raised children for 36 years, not only knowing where you're going to live for 3 months at a time is very disconcerting and also very freeing. I like to call it home free. That was the plan I came up with, was could I be home free for a year? I used to call it the homeless plan, and a friend said that's really appropriate. How do you call it home free? Free is a much better fit. And I thought, could I be home free for a year? Could I just do it for a year? And I am now on a year and a half, and I just talked to the woman I live with, and she's like, please don't leave. I'm like, oh, you can't make me leave. Are you kidding? There's a lake, there's mountains, there's paddle boards, there's kayaks, there's oriental rugs. I'm not leaving. I like your stuff better than my stuff.
That sounds beautiful. And so you're still in the present moment, allowing your next season to emerge, is what I hear from that.
Yes, so I did, as I said, immediately in Italy, trying to let go of plans. And when I landed here in September, I tried to master letting go of outcomes, right? So how do I set an intention and not be married to the outcome of the intention? And again, spent about 3 months really trying to learn who I am, I should say. And I kind of say that it actually goes back to the beginning. It started with calling my mother and saying, tell me who I was as a child. And because that's when we're our purest nature. That's when we know ourselves best, I think. And then we become teenagers, then we become a little like, wait, we try to become other people, model, and we try to, but as a child, I think we're the purest. And I find at this age, if we can tap into that, who we were before the world told us who to be, that's our essence. That's our consciousness that we buried under doing and not being. And so I spent a lot of time on that. And again, coaches would, rein me in and move me back or say, wait, 3 weeks ago you said this. I'm like, oh yeah, I did, didn't I? And that was hard because I moved somewhere where I had no connections. I had 2 sons who lived here who told me after my first week, Mom, you can't count on us to be your social life. We love you here. And I was like, no, just the first week or so. I understand. So moving to a place where I had no community, no work, no one expecting me to be somewhere. That again was that it's fallow time is what I read recently. And I realized as a teenager, I did a lot of laying around staring at the ceiling, dreaming. But as an adult, I never did. So fallow time, as I read it and interpreted it, it's a time you give yourself, whether it's 15 minutes or several hours or an entire day of thinking, just laying there thinking, right? And not reading a book or taking a nap or getting up to clean out the fridge, but literally allowing yourself to just think. We don't do enough of that. And it's hard.
Yes. I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat where there was no electronics, and your day was, I think, like 5:30 until 4:30. You meditated like 8 of those hours. But when I talk to people, I know it was crazy. When I talk to people about doing it, the reaction that I get is that that's too hard. To be with my thoughts by myself without distraction is unimaginable to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's one of the things I think one of my lessons from the year is being comfortable with being uncomfortable in many, many, many ways, from traveling to a country where I didn't speak the language, to living with family, to moving to a place where I knew no one, to learning to sit alone and be comfortable with myself. All of those things were uncomfortable initially, but they take practice, right? So like yoga's a practice, meditation's a practice. All of these things are practices. But again, they need time. So 10 days, you really learn to unplug, I imagine.
It was an experience for sure. So I really picked up on when you started to mention your granddaughter, and I had pulled something from your blog where you wrote, Facebook and Instagram make my past year look magical, but the reality is change is hard. My future feels uncertain and my journey has just begun. My life is now practice, which is what you just said. While practice makes perfect, practice is not perfect. It's about learning, acquiring skills, and it's hard work.
Right. The hardest work we might ever do is learn and prepare for this next phase of life, because I do think it's a longer period of time than it was for our parents and their parents and so on. What did I just hear? At the turn of the century, an average lifespan was 42 years old. I mean, that's just crazy to think about, isn't it? Because, I have family that lived well into their 90s and someone who lived to be 105 and be the oldest woman in the state of Washington. So that almost scares me. And, some of the things is leaving my granddaughter who has this illness, and my son and his wife who take care of her. And some people are moving closer to the grandchildren. And I struggled with that. But then I realized it's not my job to raise my grandchildren. And it's not my job to hover waiting for an emergency. If there is an emergency, I can be there. And I have to allow them the time and place to be the parents. And it's just not my job. So if my job is not to be, I could make my job being a grandmother, and it's wonderful. I would love to do that. But I have another 30 plus years if my health is good. And that's a great opportunity to be me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a great opportunity to be me. And we all have that opportunity no matter what stage of our life we're at. Would you agree?
We do. And the practices of meditation and mindfulness and a lot, maybe tools are more available. I do think people have been writing about this for a long time. I get so much solace from Anne Morrow Lindbergh and Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. And, we've discussed the Modern Elder Academy that you're attending, and it is a movement again. I think it's always been, but we just weren't reading those resources. The funny thing is, I had a teacher in high school who had us reading Gifts from the Sea. And I still have my copy, and I look at my little high school handwriting and what I underlined and wrote a note on it. I'm like, are you kidding? I had no idea what that
But isn't life a little like that? Like we go through it, and then when we reflect, we see it differently.
Yes. So what are our touchstones? And what is the practice we're going to choose?
So what are your daily practices right now that lead you into presence in the present moment?
Well, right now, temporarily, it is an extended coffee break first thing in the morning, but I journal, I listen to guided meditations, and I reflect. And sometimes I connect with people, and I find I connect in a different way now that I live far away from many friends. When I connect by phone, it's a long, extended, deep conversation rather than a mailbox exchange where it might have been at home. So I try to connect with people. Yoga is a big practice for my life, meditation, and building community. And how can I do that? But I also try to spend as much time in nature as possible. I actually took up skiing again this winter after 30 years of not skiing. I hiking Vail Mountain to raise money for cystic fibrosis in September. And so trying to find opportunities to keep me active, engaged outside as much as I can. Those are the things that drive me now.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like natural movement. Nothing against treadmills and gyms, but...
No. It's fluid. I'm in flow. My word here, I thought my word was going to be wholehearted. And I was like, I'm going to be wholehearted about everything. And I was like, actually, I think that might have happened last year by accident. But really, my word is flow. And I have the opportunity right now to not be... I used to be guided by the clock all day long. And now my calendar functions maybe 4 or 5 during the week spread out. And the rest I can fill in. And So time, the clock, is not my driver anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And my priorities then can be set by what I need that day rather than by what someone else needs that day.
That is beautiful. And I have a hunch, because it's something that I went through as I moved through that transition of not being reactive and instead being creating or designing, is that I felt, because of my own cultural upbringing, that it was selfish or ungrateful of me to do that. What were the emotions and kind of the feelings you had as you transitioned from the clock driving you to you filling in the spaces the way you wanted to?
Well, at first, like I said, it was panic. Like, this isn't how things are supposed to be, and this isn't what my financial advisor would advise. And I started to realize that there's a book out there called, it's something about Encore. And I read it a while back, and it said that, this whole retirement thing, that was a marketing strategy by Sun City. And every single financial tool has grown out of that one marketing campaign for Sun City. And I started to think, that we should work so hard and then retire and play golf. And I had a friend who was turning 60, and she said, oh my gosh, what's your takeaway from turning 60? And she said, my husband and I have 10 good years for active living. Maybe we have 20. But I'm hoping we can count on 10. And I was like, yeah, poor you. And then I was like, wait, I'm 58. Like, oh my God. I got to make changes. I'm going to learn this 2 years before her. That traveling when I'm 75 isn't going to be the same as when I'm 59. And I'm going to go grab this now. And I'm going to gather experiences as if they're currency for a rich life. And if that's what I have to live on, I think there are alternative ways to living this life. I think there's shared residences, and we're seeing a lot of that in the news now. There's co-op living. There are alternatives to having X amount of dollars in the bank account by this date. I had a friend stop by one day, and she said, oh, I just met with my financial advisor and I can't retire until I'm 70. And I just looked at her and I said, how do you feel about that? And she's like, well, that's okay, I guess. And I was like, that's letting someone else dictate. And that means assuming you'll live alone. There's certain assumptions that our financial industry is making. And that is that you will never want to live with somebody else. You will always want to live alone. But really, why? So I'm trying to see that, is there a different way to live? And does it have to be what society demands? And processing these thoughts and ideas is what the essays are all about. And I know that if they inspire at least one person to see a different way of living that day or the next year or the rest of their life, then I'm so glad that I can be of service.
Yes. I just want to say yes 3,000 more times. So, and let's dig into that a little bit, because you're spot on with who sold us retirement and what the heck is it? And why do I have to buy into it?
Right. Think about it. If you don't buy into it, you might have some exciting, creative ways to live moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's also this, I'm really fascinated by and diving into how our society, now I come from a military background and I also come from the Catholic tradition. So we have ritual and ceremony built into our circadian rhythm. Everything you do has a deeper meaning behind it. And especially with the military, my husband retired from the service and both of my men currently serve. But our society as a whole, oh, you're welcome. We'll all thank them. We do it differently, right? The medals over our hearts instead of over our uniform. But we don't have those kinds of rituals and ceremonies built into, end of work to end of life. So it creates that huge gap in what are my milestones? What am I moving towards? Where are these moments that I can celebrate in community with others?
That's really profound. Is we have a baptism and we have I was raised Catholic too, right? So we have all the sacraments, but there's nothing really between marriage and death, right? That's really profound, right? Like in Brownies, even we flew up, we crossed over the bridge and we flew up and we got our wings. Like, that's what we need to do, Vivian. We need to create ceremony. We need to give people their wings.
Oh my gosh, I have to share this because I am growing into being me and I am weird and I know that. But in a certain circle of people, the weirdness is normal. So I'm kind of evolving into that edge. But I had a meditation earlier today and I saw those wings. And the message, the meaning I made from it is to spread my own wings gives light to others, gives expansion to others. I love that you said that. Yeah. And it really builds on you doing what you needed to do didn't take life away from anyone. It actually added to it.
It actually added to it. So I had the good fortune earlier in my career to form a friendship with Ray Bradbury. And one of his most profound quotes is, jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Yeah. And that is kind of, this year. But the other thing that you brought to mind is, well, if you think of an angel, the angel uses their wings to protect people, right? To keep, they just kind of spread them over people. And I think my children have learned more from me spreading my wings than me keeping those wings really tight in my back and saying, just nobody rock the boat. And my children, I found out last week, my name's Vivian Elizabeth, and there's many derivatives, have a new one for me, and they call me Lizzie. This is who I've grown into. And behind my back, they're like, Lizzie is so much more fun and interesting than Elizabeth was. It is about spreading your wings, but it does teach and it does inspire. And I have a one-word mission statement in my life, and it's in spiritus. And it came to me when my granddaughter was born. My daughter called me. It isn't her child, it's my son's. And she said, we're going to get tattoos. I'm like, I'm not getting a tattoo. She's like, we're going to get a tattoo for Adele, and we should get Breathe because the disease affects breathing. And I said, every yoga teacher in America has Breathe. I am not putting Breathe on my body. But I started to think about it, and I had taken Latin in school. And I thought, well, wonder what Latin is, what breathe is in Latin. And it's in spiritus. But it also means to inspire, full of spirit. So breathe, inspire, spirit. And I thought back then, that was my word. And then I got busy and I never got the tattoo. But Latin, a year and a half ago, when I was trying to decide between jumping in the gap or going back to work because I had 2 children in college, and then I'd have to find a place to live because I went and sold my house. And I did a leadership exercise through Deepak Chopra's book. And he has you boil down your mission to one word. And there it was again in spiritus. So one of the things I have been building in these last 6 months is my own consulting business called Inspiritus Leadership. And to inspire, to breathe spirit into others, to remind people to breathe, to mind the gap, to notice, because life is short and change is regular and it's impermanent. Nothing we own is permanent, and we don't own people, and they're not permanent either. So becoming comfortable with that idea is something else I've been spending a lot of time.
I read that over a 7-year period, you've turned over every cell in your body. So if you think about it, you're a completely different human every 7 years. at the biological cellular level. So why wouldn't we be a different evolution of who we are and not try to hold on to the perception or the outward, who do you think I am? Oh no, I just wanted to bring you back to Lizzie, because that just delighted my heart. So with that, I mean, the idea that we can evolve even in relationship with our own children and become more of who we are, and they love that. Like, I want to say that over and over and over again, because I felt it, and when I talk to clients that are moving through these type of transitions, they tell me, like, it's selfish, it'll hurt people, and there's just that hesitation and that doubt, but on the other end, that's not what you found.
Oh my gosh, no. I worked a lot in leadership, and I thought before I came out here, my two middle children live here, I don't want to go out there and parent them. I know what strategic planning is. I know intention setting now. I'm going to let go of the outcome that I want to check on them. I want to see how they live every day. I want to see if they're really happy and motivated. But I'm going to have to come from not a management position, which I think of as motherhood in my younger years, management. And now I'm leadership. And I know how that works in the workplace. So can I apply that as a parent? Can I level up from management to leadership? Because if I can't do that with my own children, who am I to teach anyone how to do this at work? And it has been so much more rewarding, because letting go of our outcomes of what we want our children to turn out like, and check the list that they'll manage to get through college in 4 years. It's a good college and their grade point will be X, and then they will get this job, and then they will do that, and then they will get married, and then they will have 2 children. And, well, when my granddaughter was born, all of that went out the window. I realized there were no more plans anymore. There was one thing, and that was to get the most out of our lives while we could and celebrate it. And that would be our new priority. But yes, so I've been learning, and I think the children have responded very favorably. I hang out with all of their new friends now. Friends are all over to your mother's house. And I'm like, oh, good, bring them over. And it isn't the way before. You'd be like, I met this young man, and he lived where I'd lived before. And he had this necklace on, and my son brought him to my birthday party. And I thought, well, in the past, I would have been like, why are you bringing that person? I don't even know them to my birthday party. So then I start talking to this young man, and it turns out he went to a Catholic high school, and I'm judging him by this necklace. And somehow during this conversation, it comes up that this necklace makes him so uncomfortable. His cousin had made it. She had sent it to him in the mail. He didn't know what to do with it, so he wore it. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I was judging you by that necklace. And that was the old. And now we're having this conversation where I'm learning you don't even want to wear it. Like, this isn't who you are. But I, in the past, would have done this whole, and we talked about it further. Like, he's like, oh, I've actually been at your house, but I probably just honked the horn. And I was like, and that was so not okay back then, because I was old school. Like, no, your friend has to come to the door. They don't honk the horn. And I missed out meeting him years ago because I had all these rules and judgments. And so I think that is part of what my children appreciate more about me now, is I'm trying to let go of judgment and accept people where they are and who they are at all ages. Oh my goodness, that is a practice. And don't judge anyone by their necklace. They might not even want to be wearing it.
That's the lesson learned. Oh my gosh, Elizabeth. So if you were speaking directly to someone who's moving through what you went through, when you were sort of standing at the gap, deciding if you were going to leap across, words of encouragement, or what would you share with them at that stage?
I think it's several things that I've mentioned is to do an assessment of this is one of the best meditations I did. Meet your future self. So my coach guided me through meditation where I met myself 20 years from now. And oh my goodness, I was 79. Where did the time go? And she had me walk into my future self home. What was my future self wearing? What was she surrounded by? And then at the end of it, what did she have to tell me? And she told me two things. She said, I just danced at your granddaughter's wedding and everything turned out okay. And I was like, I can do it. I can go. Oh my God. So I think meeting your past self as a child and meeting your future self and then figuring out and assessing where you are on that spectrum of where you want to be and where that future self was. And what do you need to do to get there? Is it take a painting class? Is it walk 20 minutes a day? What are those habits and things have you mastered in your future self that you haven't done yet and you haven't started? And those are small gaps. And that's the assessment stage. And then the planning stage is more of set plans, don't be attached to outcomes. So I went to Italy. I had 6 weeks. So I had no time to have any single travel plan when I got there or any expectation other than to know where I would be. I was walking goats. I was watering plants. I was doing crazy stuff. And because I had no intentions and outcomes, everything that happened was magical. Every time someone said, would you like to go here for the day? I would just say yes. So there's a bit of planning, like you want to understand how to use the train system in Italy. That's part of your planning, but your outcome of I want to spend 10 days here and do this and that you have to let go of and be willing to let the experiences rise and say yes to them. So that is part of the whole minding the gaps movement, in my opinion. And then it's also being beholden to others, realizing who you're beholden to, making sure you do have people to help you when it's scary, whether it's a coach or a friend or a loved one saying, we got this, you got this, it's nothing dangerous you're doing. And my friend laughs that she said, well, what's the worst thing that could happen if you did this? And I said, well, I'd end up living in my daughter's house. And she said, okay, I've seen that house. That is not the worst thing that could happen. So she thought I'd say homeless or broke or scared. And I was just like, no, I have to live with someone else. That would be my worst outcome. And in the end, that was one of my best outcomes. The other thing I would say to people thinking about this, set a time limit. If you're uncomfortable with it, say, I'm going to try this for a day, a week, whether it's meditation, walking, or traveling, and then you can extend past it, right? So it's not going to be forever. And that you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because in our lives, we get way too comfortable. And as I live and I look around and I own and nothing in this room I own, and I'm so comfortable here. And I loved my home and I loved the things I had chosen to surround myself with. But I realized that the home had become an anchor and that I couldn't set free unless I cut the tie to the anchor. And, you have to look at what's anchoring you and is it the right things to anchor? Are you anchored to the right things?
True. Wow. Woo! So for the listeners who are super curious and want to read your words directly, tell them where to find you.
You can find my essays on Minding the Gaps, and that's with an S, .life, which seemed appropriate. Who knew there was a .life? And I'll be launching my consulting business in Spiritist Leadership within the week. And I already got my first client in my new community. And getting comfortable with being uncomfortable without, that regular paycheck. And because it's time for me to teach. I had a wonderful coach say to me, why do you think you have to keep adding to your resume and your experience? Don't you understand it's enough? And I thought, oh, and so this concept of, not that I don't want to stop learning, but what point do you turn around and start teaching? So others, right? Because if you're always learning and you're not teaching, then others don't have that opportunity to learn. So it's time to sit. Someone told me there's a book about sitting closer to the fire, that the elders in ancient civilizations, the elders were closest to the fire, and they were the storytellers, and they were the teachers, and they were cold because we get colder when we're old. But it's the place of light, magic by the fire. And so we have not only so much to learn in this phase of life, but so much to teach as well. And again, it's mastering, moving out of management and into leadership and leading. I don't know if you read the essay on my father, but my father died just about 3 months before all this happened. And as I wrote his eulogy, I realized that my father was a tremendous leader, but he never led a single person at work. He never had anyone work for him. He led our family. And so often we think of leadership as classes we take or books we've read or an MBA that we received. And no, the most important leadership we do is at home.
And leading ourselves.
Right. And leading ourselves. Right. That's a good point.
Well, and as I was listening to you, one of the things that you said that really caught my attention is what I sensed from you, tell me where I'm wrong, is that the term elder doesn't mean old. I mean, the term elder means that it's time to give back. And we can be an elder in different parts of our lives at different stages of our lives.
Yes. And wisdom is what we've gained. And wisdom is what we have to share. But we can't be judgmental, and we have to let go of outcomes, and we have to learn to go with the flow and gather experiences, whether they're that brief, pay attention. I mean, how many sunsets do we actually have left, and how many have we actually watched?
Right. Well, that's actually one of my spiritual practices. I experience each sunset. And I had one of my sons say, well, you've seen one already. Why do you have to see another one? And I'm like, they're all different. They are all different. They're never the same.
No 2 days are the same.
Yeah. And anything you look at, if you look at it with attention and care and kindness, it tells you more about itself, whatever it is. Even if you're watching a flower bloom, it changes. Nothing stays the same. We don't stay the same, and nothing in our world stays the same. But I want to draw
that impermanence.
Exactly. But I want to draw us back to what you started to say about, because I want to emphasize it about your dad, your father. He might not have had a title or a role that someone on the outside recognized, but we all have the role of leader inside of us.
Yes. Yes. And I think we get intimidated by other people who also have a title. So I'm not a leader because he's a CEO, or he's this, or he's that. And then that is the other practice that has to be. We should have 7 vices, and one of those vices is comparison, and letting go of comparison to others, and realizing that you have everything you need to move forward and to be brave. And if you don't, then get a coach. And she did not ask me to say that.
Well, I am not going to be shy of high-fiving you on that, because I am one. So.
I know. And you're not mine. Now, let's just be clear for the audience that Vivian is not my coach.
And I did not pay you to say that.
No. And sometimes that coach can be an honest friend.
Exactly.
But I know one way, and I would tell people, if you're looking for a coach and you can't afford one, the coaching schools require their students to give away so many hours free as they learn to coach. So contact the coaching schools. I mean, not everyone has to pay. Or I had a coach assigned to me through the Alumni Association of a school. And so there are different ways to receive this type of help that aren't always, I mean, you get what you pay for, but I would highly encourage people to think outside the box, you know.
I would too, definitely. And one of the things that you just said, it's a coach could be an honest friend, like someone who is going to listen and mirror, because we as coaches don't give you any answers. Right? We're compassionate witnesses is what we are. And we just help you dive into the deeper questions.
Right. Or remind you, you know, because your mind can go so many places in a week when you're judging, you know, setting goals, and you know, someone to bring you back to what your priorities are, you know, just that honest guide. I think, you know, we all need someone to hold our hand.
We all do, because we don't travel alone. None of us do. None of us travel alone. But Elizabeth, it has been amazing getting to know you. Adored your essays. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with the Turning Inward podcast listeners and with my community. And I am so grateful.
And this is a wonderful podcast, and I'm so excited to be on this journey with you, and I hope that we can stay in touch.
Definitely we will. If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.